October 28, 2010, Justice Susan Himmel of the Ontario Superior Court ruled that three key elements of Canada's prostitution laws were unconstitutional, concluding they forced prostituted women to choose between their freedom and their right to security as guaranteed by the Charter. Prostitution itself has never been illegal in Canada, but essentially what our existing laws do is render all activities around it illegal, including the three provisions struck down by Justice Himmel, which are keeping a common bawdy house or brothel, living off the avails of prostitution, and communicating for the purposes of prostitution. Justice Himmel's decision was stayed until April 29, 2011, in order to allow the federal government and Government of Ontario, both of which had indicated they would appeal the ruling, the opportunity to file the necessary paperwork and documents. The federal government filed its brief in March 2011 and obtained a further stay of the decision until the case is heard. This means that all criminal code sections dealing with prostitution remain in effect until the appeal is heard by the Ontario Court of Appeal, which is expected to take place in June 2011. But even with the appeal proceeding, there is a very real possibility that the ruling could be upheld. Because the reality is that our existing laws have been tested and found flawed by a court in Ontario. A similar challenge is now proceeding in British Columbia, and others may follow. Parliament must act. While we disagree with Justice Himmel's assertion that it's the laws that put women in danger, we do agree that the status quo isn't working. The laws as they stand neither protect women nor discourage prostitution. But what they do well is to further victimize women who, for the most part, have already been victimized in ways most of us couldn't even imagine. So is there a better, more just way forward? About 10 years ago, the nation of Sweden realized that their approach to prostitution, which was similar then to Canada's, wasn't working. They made a bold statement that as a nation, they placed great value in the concept of equality between men and women, and declared that prostitution itself was deeply contrary to that equality. So instead of seeking to better manage the problem, they would take measures to abolish it. The sex trade operates according to simple market principles of supply and demand. As long as there is a demand for the purchase of women's bodies, there will be pimps and traffickers and organized crime ready to guarantee the supply. Sweden took measures to eliminate the demand side of the equation by decriminalizing prostituted women and instead coming down hard on the buyers and the pimps. They also put in place a national strategy that would ensure that every woman who wanted to exit prostitution would have the support and resources available to her to make that possible. And significantly, they developed a broad public awareness campaign that aimed at targeting the very idea that it was okay for men to purchase women's bodies. And it's worked. An independent inquiry 10 years later found that rates of prostitution have decreased dramatically, estimated as nearly 50%. The number of women trafficked into Sweden for use in the sex trade has also decreased dramatically. And there has been no evidence of negative impact on prostituted women from the ban on the purchase of sexual services. And perhaps most importantly, in the longer term, children in Sweden are growing up with a new understanding of what is right about the equality of the sexes and about respect for women, and what's wrong about the purchase of people's bodies for sex. It's time for Canada to take a new approach, one that goes after the buyers and sellers of sex, instead of the women who are being traded and treated like chattel. One that reflects a Canadian society that says, we will no longer tolerate the exploitation of some for the gratification of others. This will take courage. Your federal member of Parliament needs to hear from you. Go and visit them and let them know you think Canada needs to chart a better, more just, more effective way forward when it comes to dealing with prostitution. Phone them or write letters. Most want to do the right thing. They need to know you're behind them.